back. Critical Conversations is back, everybody. And man, it has been far too long. But I finally got to a place where I'm comfortable enough to bring Critical Conversations back, and I've been joined tonight by a very special guest, the Map Hatter. How are you, man?
Oh, good, man. Good. I'm really nice to be on the show. Thanks very much for inviting me. Appreciate it.
No problem at all. It's really an honor to have you here. It's amazing.
Wouldn't go that far, just a mapper, but I appreciate it, man. Thank you.
Oh well, I mean, I really appreciate it whenever someone agrees to sit down, not only to join in one of my games, but to just sit down and talk some D&D with some new friends. I mean, I love it. I love playing D&D. I love playing tabletop role-playing games. I love being a DM, but sometimes I just want to sit down and just talk tabletop role-playing games. So, really, I appreciate that you take the time to come on my channel. Valiant is already in the chat there. Now, I announced earlier, guys, that we'll be to celebrate the return of Critical Conversations. We'll be giving away a $25 voucher for the Game Tile Warehouse. Why don't you tell everyone, what can they get with that $25 voucher?
Okay, so Game Tile Warehouse is my personal website. I have made around 2,500 modular maps, battle maps for encounters in dozens of genres in the last 7 years. So they're usually bundled up into packs of around 24 to 30, and for that you can probably get 2 packs and still have change. Or you can get 25 individual maps that you choose from the site as well. So and there's token packs. So it's a pretty decent it's a pretty decent amount to go shopping on my site.
That's awesome. It's really great that you've generously decided to give that away for some of the viewers tonight. All you have to do, guys, if you want to go on the draw to win that, is just leave a message in the chat. If you're watching this after the stream, you can still go in the draw, because I'm going to be announcing the winner of that during our stream of Tales from the Rogueslight Tavern next week at 8 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time on Saturday night. So if you still want to go if you missed tonight's stream, you still want to go in the draw to win that, just leave a message in the Discord channel or on our Facebook, just with a comment on one of our Facebook posts with just the hashtag Critical Conversations, and you'll go in the draw to win that as well. So, and I see Froths has joined us as well. How are you, Froths? Thank you for joining us tonight. Now, where do we get started? First of all, why don't you introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. My name is Chris McDermott. I go by the name Map Hatter. Partly because of my speed and taking on projects that are enormous in size, but still managing to complete them and then going on to the next one. So I consider myself a little bit fevered as a cartographer, very determined. I've been making maps for 7 years now. Started in 2015, and it was a career choice, doing something else. I was working in a warehouse as a delivery driver, delivering plaster and steel across Melbourne. And then I decided to do something different. And I looked around and I saw all of this free technology. You had like GIMP, which is like Photoshop, and you had Kickstarter. And I sort of put it all together, and now I've been making maps for 7 years. There's still funding, and I really love it. I'm doing what I love, and I didn't know I would love it so much. But I mean, I went through an intense period of making maps when I was maybe from like 10 to 15, but then I didn't do it at all until much later. And I'm 43 now, so what's that? I started when I was 37. So yeah, it's been a crazy ride, and I love that there is so much support for what I do, and that it's still enabling me to make a living from it. And it's just really rewarding to know that something I make is being used by someone else on their table. And I mean, it's just such an awesome feeling, and I love it. I think I'm living the dream.
Yes, you're definitely living the dream, because I think there's far too few people who can say that they really love what they do. You know, there's a lot of people who are fine, happy enough doing the job that they're doing, but there's not enough people who can really say that they love, you know, what they're doing. And I can relate as well, you know, that feeling that something that you create is something that other people enjoy. Now, I'm not the biggest Twitch channel out there, not by far, we all know that, but just the fact that there's maybe one or two people who enjoy what I do is an amazing feeling. And you know, I would love to do this, even just like part-time. You know what I mean? Because I want to be where you're at. I'm not gonna mince my words. I want to be where you're at. I want to do what I love, and I love doing this, and I love sitting down with amazing guests like yourself and people. You know what? That's the great thing about playing, you know, tabletop role-playing games and D&D, especially at the moment with the internet, is you can play with people from all around the world. You know what I mean? And like it's really a special sort of community as well, because I don't think there's any other community out there really that I could just send a message to a random person. I saw one of your posts on Facebook about some of the work that you did, and I'm like, hey man, do you want to jump on? And you're like, absolutely, cool, let's do this. And for that, like, is there another community that you can think of where people would just be happy to jump on a live stream online and just, you know, talk about something that they love doing? I couldn't think of anything else like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's a pretty close-knit community. I think a lot of people, it's quite a small world. It's surprising who you bump into, but I think we're all of a certain type of behavior, character, personality, where we just like to get together and have fun. And there's different ways to do that, especially today with all of the technology available. Don't have to sit at a table. You know, you can use Tabletop Simulator or Fantasy Grounds or Roll20 and, you know, craft this entire world with people that are halfway across it. And in the blink of an eye, you know, everything is so facilitated. But one thing I found in the RPG industry is people are quite humble. People are down to earth, and they just really enjoy, you know, being able to play and just forget their worries for a while. And that's one of the other reasons I really enjoy doing maps, is that in all of my years on this planet, I've found that one of the most worthwhile things is being able to play, because the world's pretty harsh at times, and for a lot of people, and to just be able to escape and to be able to be, you know, involved in providing that escape and give people some relief is just really nice. And I think people that play RPG, they come to have a good time. They like to get involved, and they like to help other people out. So
exactly,
I mean,
yeah.
I do, and I know you do, and I've met a lot of people that just see it as a community more than an independent industry. Very connected.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, everyone's super encouraging. No one, I haven't spoken to anyone yet, and I've spoken to a lot of people who have made me feel like, they're too big or they're too good or anything like that to talk to me. Of course, I've reached out to a few people and haven't heard back, but I fully understand that because people have, massively full schedules. They can only do so much stuff. So, but I've never felt I've never felt spoken down to. No, like I said, I'm not the biggest channel out there. I know that. I'd like to build it up, and we are building up. We're building a great community that is reflective of the whole D&D community as a whole, because we all encourage each other. And you make a good point about like when you're playing D&D or when you're playing tabletop role-playing games, you sort of you can disconnect yourself a little bit from the stresses or the worries of the world, and that's something that we do as kids. Now, we were talking just before the stream started. I've got 2 kids. They like to play with each other, and they have these crazy imaginations that they can really explore and dig into. And then we get to like a certain age, and that's sort of frowned upon. You're not supposed to do that anymore. You know what I mean?
Stop. Yeah. Some of us. Yeah.
And it's crazy, man. It's crazy because not only is it it's just a lot of fun, but it's also good for you. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
because
definitely.
if you can forget those stresses and you're in an environment where everyone's encouraging and and you get to be creative, you can tap into those synapses that you wouldn't use otherwise, and you become like more intellectual in a way. You become more creative, and then you can take that creativity and apply it to so many other things that you do. And I'm sure that that's come out in your map making as well. Like being able to apply that creativity makes you more creative. Thus, the maps that you make are more and more wild. You know what I mean? Have you found that you become more and more creative with the maps that you've made over time, or?
Yeah, absolutely. You create something, and it's like a stepping stone, and then it encourages you to create something else and maybe go in a different direction. And I've been using GIMP, which is a graphic image manipulation program, for 7 years, and almost every day I discover something new I can do with it.
Yep.
And even just like finding a special filter or an effect makes me think, oh, I could make a whole set of maps out of this. And every map feeds into everything else. When I first started, I was really trying to be very creative and make a whole broad range of things. And then I went back to just focusing on, say, forest, jungle, snow. But then as my skills improved, I took on harder and harder projects. And now I've done like steampunk, and I've done Wild West and sci-fi and zombie and modern and Atlantis. I mean, I've done so many just because I wanted to challenge myself and see where my skills could go. And every map set I make teaches me something new, and I'm certainly not running out of ideas. I think I've only scratched the surface. And going back to your previous comment, I think at some point I would like to do some sort of academic research or paper into the therapeutic nature of D&D and see if it can be analyzed and proven and established that D&D is actually like a form of art therapy. Mm-hmm. Because I believe that people taking on a personal, an alternate personality has a much deeper meaning than simply play acting.
Yep.
I think for a lot of people, the game is quite healing. And I think it allows them to explore sides of themselves they wouldn't normally get to explore, which I think is obvious. But for some people, that can be more beneficial than others. And I found that you take, say, a shy character, a shy player, and after a while, they start to get right into the game and they forget that they were shy. It's one example. Or you take someone that is, a bit not very good at resolving conflict, and then over time through D&D, they learn how to work with others more. It's quite transformative when you play RPG, how much someone changes from the person you know into the character they're playing, and then that has a knock-on effect on their actual out-of-game personality. So in terms of like creativity chaining to itself, I find that not only does it work with maps, and I mean, I'm trying to create a board game now. I'm writing my own stories. So I've gone from maps to tokens to all sorts of things to try and broaden my horizons. But I also find that being a DM and a player has also widened my personality and given me a greater insight into the human condition, for lack of a better word. And I think that there is definitely a therapeutic element to both of those art forms.
Yeah, I agree entirely. There's more to it than just people sitting around a table playing a board game, which is what people on the outside might see if they just look at it as, like casually, as it were. I don't know if I told you this, but one of the main reasons why I started playing D&D in the first place was I was at a time like very, very isolated. I am naturally, ask anyone, I'm a natural introvert. I don't really get out there and talk to people. I find it very draining. I'm also quite triggered by sound and multiple voices, as it were. If I get lots of people talking, that can really overwhelm me because I don't seem to have a filter on that, as it were. So at one point in my life, I was very isolated. I was with my girlfriend and my kids and my family a lot, and I would go to work. I wouldn't really talk to anyone at work. I would just mind my own business, and I would go home, and it was just the same cycle. And if you had told someone at that point in my life that I would be sitting down and broadcasting myself live on the internet for people to see, they would have just laughed in your face. You know what I mean? No one would have believed that. So I was like, this has got to stop. Like I used to do boxing, kickboxing as well, but that was also, even though I interacted with other people in that, it was also a very singular, isolated sort of thing. I would go, I would do my training, and that was it. I would go home. I didn't really talk to people. You know what I mean? And I was like, no, this has got to stop. I've got to have human interaction. I've got to talk to people. So I was like, what can I do? I was listening to D&D podcasts because I already had an interest in it. I was like, damn it. And I sat down and I went on Facebook and I looked it up and I found a game that was with Luke Archard from Big Game, Small Pieces, Curse of Strahd. Amazing. Had a lot of fun playing that. And at first I was very reserved and my character reflected it. And I think this is exactly what you were just talking about. I was very reserved and my character reflected that. And as I began to continue playing, I became less and less sort of, what's the right word for this? Into my character, because I'd played it so reserved. I was like, no, this is not what I want to play anymore. This isn't me anymore. I'm someone completely different. So now whenever I make characters, my characters are always quite wild. You know what I mean? Yeah. Because I, as a person, have evolved from playing D&D, and man, it's really helped me out, like mentally and psychologically, and that's why, even though I'm not getting paid a dime to do this, I don't care. I love doing this. I love sitting down and meeting new people and talking to new people and finding out about their experiences and sharing that with other people.
Yeah, man, that's a classic example of the dynamic. You know, you play the game and you explore sides of yourself that you normally don't have access to, that you can feel safe to explore. And I think it comes back to you in the real life, you know, in the real world.
Yeah.
It has like a transformative effect, and I find that fascinating, and I find it really rewarding to see people self-actualize, and some people say come out of their shell. I think it's better to say to access more of their personality, because everyone can be whatever they want. And I think when they start playing these different characters and exploring different options for who they want to be and how they want to be, it really does reflect an ability to metamorph themselves as people. And I find that fascinating. It's this like deep psychology, which is something I'm very interested in how people evolve and how they think and why they do things. And I think D&D is a very rich resource for exploring all of that.
Yeah, I actually think there's someone here in Townsville who did a university project of some sort. I don't know what the correct terminology is about that. I think it's the same person who's actually going to be the GM or the keeper for our Call of Cthulhu game, which is coming up. So I might actually have to sit down with her and have a chat and see what she came up with her study, because it is super interesting. And I now that I think about it, the way that I am with work, like I said, I used to just go to work and go home. I would never talk to anyone. That's completely different now. The way that I interact with people when I'm even just random people that I don't even know, I would never have done that, a few years ago. Now I'm quite happy to just walk up to someone and just talk to them, you know what I mean, and interact with people. And that's come from, when you're living your life without thinking about it, your personality sort of sits in your subconscious. When you play Dungeons and Dragons, you've got to think about how someone would act. It brings it from the subconscious to the conscious mind. You've got to actually think about it, and then you're more aware of it.
Yeah, and I think that should be reflected in its power, as a therapeutic process.
Yes.
And I really do think that it's an untapped, resource. I think really RPG and of whatever style has the power to break through people's resistances and transform them into much stronger, more capable, more eloquent, and more likely to enjoy who they are.
More attuned.
Instead of feel sheltered or hurt or shy, or like they can't, be who they want to be. And I think that's just really cool. And the fact that we're basically sitting around the fire and telling stories like they did however many thousands of years ago, just in a different format, with computer chips and screens. It's exactly the same thing. And I think there's something archetypal about people that need stories. And we've kind of subsist on the whole premise that a story needs to be told, someone needs to tell it, and we need some people to, be part of it. Mm-hmm. It's like theater, movies, music, all of these things, they're basically different versions of the same thing. But I think what distinguishes role-playing games is that a lot of that content comes from people that you wouldn't expect it to. Theater, movies comes from actors, comes from people who have practiced drama, but RPG just comes from ordinary people, and suddenly the whole personality that they never knew even existed bursts forth out of their subconscious, with its own accent, its own name, its own background, its own appearance, its own stories, its own life. And to put it in one way, it's like you're summoning a demon, and then you didn't even know that was there. But there's this whole set of personalities that arrive intact with all of these details you need. But I think also, to some extent, some people have trouble controlling that, and that's where you get a lot of the conflict in the games, is you're asking someone to invent something that they have no knowledge of, that just comes up from within intact, and has to be so realistic as to form a part of the game in such a way that it feels like a real human being, or a real being of some kind of creature with everything that we have. But then it dominates, and you find some people have a conflict between trying to control that character. So they bring up an evil character, and then the actions they play in the game are true to these demon, true to the personality they pulled up. I think that is also an aspect of RPG that I would find fascinating to be explored in an academic sense. I'm not really sure where that comes from, or why it takes over, or if people are even aware of that fact. But I think those things, they deeply interest me, and I would really like to see role-playing games get explored and get the accolade it deserves for just how amazing it can be in terms of how it affects people's lives.
So, I mean, bring it down to brass tacks. I guess what we're saying here is I'm essentially, I should be getting paid a therapist wage. I think that's what I'm getting at here. Yeah? All right. So I'm pretty sure the government should be paying me as well, because I'm helping the community. So who's the Prime Minister at the moment? I don't even know who's the Prime Minister. Who's the Prime Minister?
Anthony Albanese.
Anthony Albanese. Get onto it, buddy. I'll send you my bank account details. Start paying me.
Yeah, I wouldn't hold your breath, but maybe.
No, you're right, man. There's so much to it, and I think we're getting to the point where it's getting a little bit more recognition, that we could start seeing a little bit more of an in-depth look. Of course, there's been studies done into it, but they're not really on the forefront of people's consciousness at the moment. So I think we're sort of transitioning to this period of the life of role-playing games, where it's coming a little bit more into the collective consciousness. You've got Stranger Things, which is heavily involved. With the whole D&D sort of mythos, as it were. We've got another Dungeons and Dragons movie coming up, which is hopefully not going to be quite as bad as the previous ones. Have you ever seen those movies?
No, I tried to avoid them because partly I'm too busy, but also I know I don't have time to watch a bad movie. I'd rather watch a good one, and there's so many other good movies out there, and I'll wait till they make a good one.
Well, I'm not going to lie. You know how you can do watch parties on Twitch? I would love to sit down and watch one of those Dungeons and Dragons movies just with a group of friends, have a drink, because they are, if you have a dial for how much camp is in a movie, these movies just they just turn those things up to 120%, man. They're wild, and not only are they just completely wild in regards to camp, they really butcher the whole D&D lore. So
yeah, that's what I figure. I don't want to see that done. I'd rather play Xbox or PlayStation, have a fully, like Dragon Age or something. I'd rather just immerse myself in that.
In something good. It is worth it's worth a watch if you want to see something funny. If you have a bit of Schadenfreude.
Yeah, I might go find it at some point. I mean, you can pull inspiration from anywhere. It'd be interesting to see how Hollywood has interpreted Dungeons and Dragons for one thing. But man, you can get a bad movie anywhere,
Yeah, you can. You absolutely can. It's pretty universal when it comes to games adapted into movies. So I guess I can't really just point out Dungeons and Dragons just on its own. But I'm pretty keen to see what they do with it now. They've got a decent cast. Could be interesting. I don't judge books by their respective covers. Well, I do, but I also judge them by what's written in the pages as well. So I'm interested to see, what they make of it. And in regards to the whole like D&D community and how it, it's sort of like blossoming and exploding. Have you noticed, like, in your experience that, like, when I first started playing D&D, I wouldn't really tell people so much, and then I got older and I gave less and less of a shit and I started telling everyone. I was surprised the more people that I told, like, which people responded with, like, wow, that's cool, I want to do that too. It was such a crazy, wild variety of people, and I think that's what sort of lends itself, to the whole creativity of D&D, is because it's available and it's accessible to just about anyone. You don't have to be a star athlete. You don't have to be a top-paid actor. You don't have to be rich. You don't have to be, your stereotypical nerd. You can be into cars, you can be into, boxing, you can live in your grandma's basement, you can be a top paid actor. Like, everyone's doing it and they're all coming out of the woodworks, and it's awesome.
It's like technology. People are very slow to adopt something that's novel and weird, and for a long time Dungeons and Dragons was like the unknown. It had the satanic panic. People like freaking out that it was killing their children and taking over the world with the devil.
Yeah.
Well, we're not too far from that today, but I think over time, because it's become something that's sort of crept up through media over time and become acceptable and more widespread. Got like Lord of the Rings and things like that. More exposure to the genre for a much broader audience, and over time all of those unknowns have become broken down, and of course eventually people pick it up of every kind. It's like the mobile phone. People were so worried about all of these things about radiation and the effect on the environment, but everybody has a mobile phone. You go back through technology, people were scared of the light bulb.
Yeah.
They were scared of the wheel. They were scared of all of these things until eventually it just became commonplace, and then everyone used it. And I think it's D&D's turn.
There's always resistance when there's something new, and the stranger it is, the more resistance you get. And like you said, you get that with everything. You get that with vaccinations and all kinds of stuff. But I won't dive into that rabbit hole. What was I going to say? I was going to say something and it's completely slipped my mind. That's not a very good thing for a host to say, is it? Doesn't matter.
No. Yeah, it happens all the time, man. I mean, so many thoughts going through your head. You got to choose one,
Oh, yeah. That's right. I know what I was going to say. So the whole satanic panic thing when you brought it up. What's the actor from Forrest Gump? What's his name?
Tom Hanks.
Tom Hanks. Yeah, I knew it was Tom. Tom Hanks. That was his first acting role. Was in a anti D&D satanic panic movie. Did you know that?
No, I did not. What was the name of that?
It's amazing. I can't remember what the title of the movie was, but it's basically like it's like a propaganda movie against Dungeons and Dragons, where a guy plays Dungeons and Dragons and it takes over his life and he ends up murdering someone or something like that. It's so silly. But yeah, a little bit of fun trivia for you. Mark Hillman is in the chat. That's the player whose character I killed last night. I'm sorry, Mark. I'm sorry, but he had it coming.
I think people misunderstand Satanism and D&D.
Yes.
In so many regards.
Yes, definitely. Satanism is highly misunderstood. If you don't know what we're talking about, guys, just you can check it out for yourself. Let's go back. Let's wind the clock back, as it were, and go all the way back to the beginning. How did you get started with tabletop role playing games and D&D and all that kind of stuff? What was the very beginning for you?
Interesting. I don't think when I started, which was way back in the 80s, I don't ever remember playing at an actual table. I played Hero Quest, which was a board game that came out in 1986. And I think I got it in 1991. I was like 12 or something. And that was the best, biggest, most amazing thing that I had ever had access to. I lived in New Zealand, in a very remote part of the country. It was very rural. There was two shops in the town. There was nothing for miles, and so creativity was, you had to find your own source of inspiration, and I found it in nature. But also, when I got HeroQuest, everything changed. It was like, it's hard to describe, but it's like nothing I'd ever had before. You had these little miniature tiny figures of orcs and characters. You had a board with squares and dungeon rooms. You had dice, you had cards. And right then and there, I knew, I was getting introduced to all of these different mechanics at once that I had no idea existed except through, say, Monopoly, which everybody had.
Yep.
And to see what was possible between, say, Monopoly and this HeroQuest just blew my mind. And I picked up HeroQuest and I ran with it. I played and played and played, and I started writing my own quests, and I painted the figures, and I got really high off the paint because I was using turpentine, and I was like, I had no idea what I was doing. I'd seen on the you could paint things just vaguely. I didn't really know what I was doing. I was really getting very high painting these things at 12 years old. I didn't have the window open. I didn't know that was a thing. And I just had the best time in the world. And then I started making my own maps for them. I started designing my own levels. And this was like really young. And when I was 8, there used to be this drink in New Zealand. I think you can get it here in Australia, called Quick. And there was a competition for a computer. First prize, I think, and I'm not even sure if most people even know what this is, but my first prize was a IBM, and second prize was a Commodore 64.
Yep.
And to my absolute astonishment, we entered the competition and we won the Commodore 64, which at the time was worth around $3,000, which I don't know what that's worth today, but you can pick up a Commodore 64 for like $25. But they were like, that was the second revolution for me, is that there's an electronic version of this HeroQuest type theme. And that's where I got introduced to Dungeons and Dragons and Baldur's Gate, I think, maybe. And I found some friends that were into it too. And at the time, there was another thing, is that the background where I was growing up is fantasy, high fantasy, and those types of epic movies were absolutely, the order of the day. You had like Conan and Willow and Legend, and you had like Wizards, which was that old cartoon. It just RPG seemed like it was everywhere. And over time, I eventually understood that it was a form of story. And because I'd grown up reading, all these amazing authors, and because, again, out in the country, to find your own entertainment, do a lot of reading, used to go to a lot of garage sales, pick up a lot of books, and like Alice in Wonderland, Phantom Tollbooth, Lord of the Rings, those things just, they were like the fertile ground where I got a lot of my ideas and understanding of where these elements in RPG come from. And then I think the fourth revolution was a book series by Ian Livingstone and Steve Jackson called Fighting Fantasy. And we talked about those previously, but they are pick-a-path books, and you roll up a character basically with stamina and skill, and you choose which option you're going to take from the text. So you read the book, and it says, do you want to do A or B based on what's happening, and then you'll go to that page and you'll find out what's happening. And sometimes you might get into combat, and other times you might have to test your skill. And right there and then, among those four massive transformative experiences, I think I was born, like
Yep.
that, where my creativity found its generative energy. And from that, I just made so many different things, I made this Jurassic Park out of blocks that took up my whole bedroom. I had Lego. Lego was amazing. I can do so many things with Lego, especially as it related to RPG. I mean, back then, it just seemed like the perfect mix of things to get someone passionately interested in that, because that was like a saturated market. It was everywhere at the time. And then I think when I came to Australia, I left all of that behind and got on with life. And only back in 2015, like 25 years later, did I pick it back up. And now I've been doing it for 7 years and having the time of my life.
Yeah, that's it's a hell of a journey. I gotta give you that much. And you bring up a good point. Like when you're living in like sort of an isolated area, you don't really have that many people to play with. I guess like those types of books where you can sort of you can sit down and go on that journey sort of by yourself. That probably would be like a huge influence. And like I sort of got this picture in my mind. I apologize for laughing earlier when you were saying when you were painting and you were getting high off the fuse as you were painting, because all I could imagine is like your first mini being like this super realistic mini with like it's a green orc, so it's green and the weapon's metal, and like as you go on with the minis or whatever it was that you were painting, they get just like more and more wild with the color the colors and stuff like that.
Actually, interestingly, the orcs were supposed to be green,
Yeah.
but I painted them black, brown, purple, red, white. I gave them like all different colors,
Yeah.
But their clothing was similar. They were like tribes. Even then, I knew somehow that they had to be connected. And decades later, I saw when the internet arrived, when I saw people that had made armies and stuff, and I was like, oh, okay, well that's how it's meant to be. Cool.
Yeah. It sounds like you have not only like that creativity, but you also have a very, I don't know what's the right way to put it, but like organized. You know how to put one and two together and sort of organize these things in a way that is not only creative but sort of makes sense. And I think it's like a fundamental part of being not only like a DM and a player, but as a content creator, is you got to have like not only creative but organized within your own mind how all these little things sort of fit together. And I imagine that probably ties in a lot with map making as well. At first glance something may seem just like you've put a table and but there's a story behind that in your own head. Is that sort of how you look at it when you're creating a map? Is like you're not just putting things on a table for people to play with. There's a story and there's a reason as to why the table is where it is and why the kitchen is where it is and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. If there's organization to my creativity, it's because I saw others do it first. Like HeroQuest had rules and it had a very organized structure. Movies, they have a plot line.
Yep.
Books, they have chapters and archetypal themes that unfold. So I saw all these things very early. And so it's only natural that I would also go, okay, 1 and 2, 3 and 4, 5 and 6. But yeah, absolutely. When you make a map, at least for me, you're creating a lived-in world. It's not like just plonking down a table and then putting stuff on it and then going to the other side of the room and plonking down another table. These things have to, at least for me, tell a plausible story and provide a realistic environment where everything is what you would expect to see in that room based on what that room is.
Yeah.
So, if someone if an untidy wizard lives in a castle, their chair's not going to be neatly pushed in against their table. Their table is not going to be very neatly ordered and all square and at right angles. It's going to be messy. The chair will be out. Maybe it's like scratched on the floor because they're getting up and down a lot. I mean, you can overthink these things, but I think it really helps to understand what you would do if you were the character that lived in that room, and what you would need and how you would use it, how you might not use it. Like certain things might get neglected, like a wizard is so busy with his books, for instance, that he doesn't have time to clean, the bathroom or something, so that has lots of cobwebs or whatever, So I think you really just have to immerse yourself in what you would do when you're moving through that room. And virtual tabletop adds another element to it, because a lot of map makers, they've made maps freely without ever thinking about the dimensions that tabletop now requires. So when you lay a grid over a map, a lot of the time, if people haven't designed that map for VTT, you cut off doors, you get pinched spaces, you have a lot of clutter which your character has to stand on. A lot of map makers have not yet acknowledged that when you play VTT and a grid is laid over the top, you need to have clear squares for characters to stand on in order to definitively, as a DM, tell someone, yes, you got hit by that meteorite that landed in square one, or no, you didn't get hit by that meteorite because you're standing in square two. It has to be, mathematically aligned to the grid, I think, in order to measure the distance, because that's why they put the grid over. So a lot of like Fantasy Grounds automates how far you can shoot an arrow based on where your character is, to where you target, and then it works out how many squares across. And also, I mean, if you're trying to come through a map and then you can't quite fully stand on the square because a door's in the way, or there's detailed objects that make it hard to stand clear. I mean, these don't seem like big problems unless you're a DM and you have to work out definitively where someone is and where they're not. And that can turn into a big fight. I've seen that happen. But it also, you want to be adapting to the new environment as a mapper, where you do understand how people are using your maps. I think that's very important. And I see some adaptation, but I also see a lot of people that are still doing them the traditional way, including Dungeons and Dragons WotC. They really don't seem to understand VTT at all.
Yeah. Look, I run all of my games online at the moment, and I am constantly looking for maps to run for the players and all that kind of stuff. And that's a huge point, man. I don't know how many really nice looking maps I've passed over on because it does not fit with the virtual tabletop. I cannot get the grid to sit in a way, because you do get those situations where a character is unsure, or a player is unsure whether or not their character can stand in a certain square. Like a 5 foot wide door will be right in the middle of two squares on the grid, as it were, and they don't know, you can't really sit them in the middle of it. It makes it a nightmare. So to avoid having to make those decisions and really bog down gameplay like live on Twitch, a lot of the times I'll get a map, see if it works. If it doesn't work, I have to get rid of it. So it's a massive point, because it makes the gameplay so much more difficult if it doesn't line up with sort of that 5 foot square. Yeah, you're absolutely right. I actually did a little bit of an experiment when I did a real life game. I had a friend of mine actually Ando from Othic Gaming, who was, he was getting involved with the campaign, and he made us like a big sort of IRL map of like sort of this hill with the standing stones in the middle of it, and we did a little bit of an experiment because it didn't have a grid. I was like, well, how am I going to run this? We did the old school little bits of rope where I put markings on it every 24 centimeters, so every inch or whatever it was, and we sort of measured it out that way, and it was actually a lot of fun. But I imagine you can't do something like that when you're talking about virtual tabletops. So that's a big point, and that goes out there for everyone out there that's making maps. Do keep that in mind. Is if you're making these maps for virtual tabletops, you kind of have to make sure that it will work on a virtual tabletop.
Yeah, a lot of RPG companies don't understand it either. A few of them are struggling with virtual tabletop. I think maybe 50% of people understand mapping for VTT, and maybe 50% of mappers don't. But I mean, if you're going to get into that market, you need to use the product that other people are using and understand how maps are used within that product. That's what I did with Fantasy Grounds and Roll20, is went on there and tried to understand exactly how you lay a grid over and how people are using these games. And as a DM, and as an end user, you gain a lot of insight into how your maps should be and what is required for them to meet that criteria. So in that regard, I was well suited to start designing within that sphere. But also I had a lot of initial help from a guy named Aaron Marks, who runs Fantasy Grounds Academy. Okay. He teaches people how to learn how to play Fantasy Grounds from the ground up. They might know nothing about it. He teaches them. He runs like a college, I guess you would say.
Yep.
He teaches people. That's where I was doing that combat series with the arena that I mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
So he explained to me, these things early on. So it's credit to him catching me early before I got into that and explaining to me what needed to be done in order to meet the requirements for VTT. So shout out to Aaron Marks for sure. I mean, that's why my maps will all line up on VTT, because he took the time to explain what the problem was and more or less how to fix it.
Yeah, I'm just looking at one of the maps that you sent me at the moment, and it looks like a sort of like a round tower, and just looking at it, like I've done like a lot of maps. This would be a map that I would use, because this looks super easy, where I could just grab I use above VTT, and I could just put the grid straight over the top of that, and when the players play it, I know I would never get any questions like, can my character stand here or can my character not stand here? And if I did, it would be easy to make that judgment. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because I can see, the stairwell on the right-hand side there. I can clearly see that takes up a 3x3 sort of block. So they can't stand in that 3x3 block unless they're actually standing on the stairs. I can quite clearly see there's an alcove on the western wall there. That's just perfectly 5-foot square block. They can go in there. And a lot of the times maps that I pull off the internet or whatever, they don't have that sort of availability. They're not optimized for that, and it makes it really difficult. So I'll just pass over those maps entirely. So that's
there's another element to it too. Like if you're looking at that map, you find that there are a lot of VTTs. Some are really powerful. Some can handle really larger maps, and some are not. And some need to be shrunk down. But every map I make 5 versions of it. One large that you can print.
Yep.
One large, and this is like 300 DPI, so you can print it. And then one the same, but with a grid. And then 3 different ones gridless. So you can always apply a grid at 140 pixels, 100 pixels, and 50 pixels, and it will always line up. It will always fit. And that's my formula.
Wow, that's
So
that I can see why it takes up so much of your time. If you have to consider that while making every single one of your maps, that's it's got to be a lot of like calculations with exactly where you place everything and how you sort of structure these environments.
meanders are modular too. If you look, maybe not the round one if that's a tower because it's up in the air, but if you look at most of my maps, they have 10 different entrances and usually 4 to 6 roads. And these points all join, they're constant across every map. So if you take like a forest map and you join it up to a jungle map, the entrances, the small pathways will line up.
Yeah, yeah, that's cool.
So, yeah, and so I also have to take into account those entrances and exits every time. And sometimes I have to get very creative with the way I do maps because I'm trying to build a map for VTT capability, strategic operations, and tactical placement. I have to watch movement and make sure that characters can move through the environment easily. I also have to be careful that I don't block off those entrances. So when I'm making a map, it does get very complex as to how and where I can place things. And
Yes.
because I've been doing meanders for 7 years now, and because it's sort of like my bread and butter product, I can't really break away from it.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I enjoy doing it, but I always have to keep that in mind that it has to be modular and designed a certain way. And it can create havoc with some designs, but I think it lends to some certain creativity where it's like, okay, well, I wouldn't normally put that there, but I have to. So,
Yeah, yeah, and modularity like is important as well in regards to maps. Like some people are playing online using virtual tabletops, so they can just grab a map and change the scenes or whatever. But if you're not doing that, if you're playing in real life and you have these things sort of printed off, what happens when a character you can't have you only have so much table space to work with. You know what I mean? So you can't have just this massive map. So the modularity becomes integral. Like if a character walks off in this direction, cool, I can grab this one and put it on it, or I can shift it over or whatever. So yeah, that's because that's one of the problems that I had when I was running games, in real life is how much real estate I have available on my table to work with. Once I reach the edge of that, how am I going to do that? So I'd have to have multiple sheets of grid paper, 1 story, 2 stories, or if something didn't fit, I would have to move it over to another one. For the smaller maps, I would get the official maps and have them printed off and put a grid over the top of them and do it that way. But for the bigger ones, yeah, it becomes very difficult. And a lot of D&D abilities and weapons and all that kind of stuff, they have ranges of up to 300 feet or something like that. So if you only use very small maps, it's they become kind of useless. So I've always wanted to explore the sort of larger maps. So having that modularity opens that up without having to take up so much of your table space. You can add one, you can take one away.
Well, you can make trillions of combinations because of the 2,500 of them. Almost every single one of them will fit with itself or with another meander. But also, one of the points about that was in Fantasy Grounds you have to swap maps a lot, and so sometimes if you swap maps, you have to move the characters because the map doesn't match up.
Yep.
But with my design, you can just slot it under, and you don't have to move the characters at all. And it's. I was trying to solve a lot of problems.
Yep.
With this map design, and it seems to have been taken up pretty readily by the RPG industry, or I wouldn't still be sitting here making them.
Yeah, exactly. Like you've made a living out of it, so you know you're doing the right thing. You're doing something special. You're doing something good. So good on you for that. And I think the RPG community, you know, they owe you a beer, as it were. I don't know if you drink or not, but yeah. Cool. So I think we've covered a lot of this. What is what is one experience that you've had in D&D or tabletop gaming in general that sort of stands out to you? Do you have any either funny or just an experience that sort of stands out to you, or?
Well, that's a sort of it's a sort of environment where so many crazy, funny, silly, impossible things are happening that it's hard to pick one.
It's hard to pick one, yeah, exactly, yeah, and yeah, there's so many that once you get a new one, you forget one that happened before. But yeah, I don't know. If you don't, that's okay. But if you've got one that's at the top of your head, I'd love to hear it.
Well, spoiler alert for Lost Mines of Phandelver.
Yep.
So go away if you haven't played that. But make sure you come back, of course.
Please do.
Yeah, we faced the Green Dragon, and it was decimating us. We were really low level, of course, and it was decimating us. And the party was hiding under trees. A couple of us had been massacred, and it was looking very, very grim. And halfway across the map, I wasn't even an archer. I picked up one of the other characters' bows and tried to take a shot at the dragon. I think it was on pretty low points, but it had pretty much wiped us out.
Yeah.
I rolled a 20, natural 20, and critically hit it, and it saved all our lives. And I think that was the only time in D&D I've heard people cheer. And it was really nice. It was I felt that heroic energy, oh wow, this is the exhilarating part of D&D that you live it for, that you hope for, that you play it for. And I mean, those moments, they come along, fairly frequently. It's a pretty epic game, but to have players cheer, I mean, that was awesome.
Yeah, it can really invoke emotions that you wouldn't get with any other, board game. I hesitate to call it a board game, but I mean it has sort of some things in relation to other board games. But it really does and really can invoke emotions when you overcome a challenge like that. That was it was getting really dicey, getting really hairy, and you overcome it. I've had moments like that too, where people have been like, yes, we did it, and that's what I do it for. I love invoking those emotions. We were talking earlier about episode 6.5 of Out of the Abyss, which I ran last night, where we had a I don't want to give away too many spoilers for those people who didn't manage to catch it live, but we had a moment where I could physically see the physical reaction of my players, and he said, my hands were shaking when I rolled that dice because it was hairy, it was close, man, and they finally came out on top, but there was still that feeling, and I felt it too when that one particular thing happened. I felt it in the pit of my stomach. I was like, oh man, you even hear me say it, I was like, oh man, I feel sick.
Yeah, man, it's like being transformed to another world, especially if you have a good DM.
Yeah,
immersion is so real that you blur the line between what's real and what's not, and for you the game becomes reality, in a sense that you really do care if you make that jump. You really do care if that monster hears you. Mm-hmm. You really do care if one of your party members go down. Whereas someone watching it from afar is just seeing you knock over these figures, and it's like, well, what are they doing? It's like Monopoly or something. But it's it's a testament, I think, as a DM to being able to tell a really good story when you can change people's emotions and make them care about cardboard and plastic and electronic tokens, to so much that, I've seen people cry
Yep.
when their character dies. I've felt, rich range of emotions that, often don't feel so heightened in the real world. And I love the game. I think it really has some astonishing ability to sweep people up and just make them forget that they're playing a game.
Get really invested in it, or like really emotionally invested. And you don't really get that. Like I find that is few and far between in media. I played a lot of video games. I've had games which I've really enjoyed, like mechanically, but I just don't get invested. I can think of a few of them off the top of my head. I love games by like Bethesda, for instance. I don't want to single something out, but
yeah, I love Bethesda's games.
They're great mechanically, but you know what? I've never felt emotionally invested in one of those games. Whereas you get these games that are not very like as mechanically sound, especially with like the old school JRPGs that I used to play. You become emotionally invested in these characters because they tell this like personal story, and it gets that emotional response from you when a character dies or something like that. I have a very vivid memory of playing a game. I don't think many people have heard of it. It was called. It was on the Super Nintendo. It was called Lufia 2. I never played the first one, but the second one was a prequel, and man, really tugged in your heartstrings, that one. And there was a long time when I didn't have that emotional investment in very much. Like Baldur's Gate, the original Baldur's Gate games, number 1 and 2, they were a couple of those games where I had that sort of rich emotional investment, and that's what sort of drove me to playing D&D in the first place, because I seek that, I crave that. It's I want to get emotionally invested. Same thing with movies, you can have these really flash movies that maybe even have a really good storyline to tell, but if you don't get emotionally invested in it, it's forgettable.
Yeah, I found that with Stranger Things and the Witcher series. I actually, really, really paying attention and lost myself in them. I thought they were really, really good. The combination of music and what's happening on the screen has become really epic. Dragon Throne, that's the same.
How good are TV shows these days?
They're really good. They're really good. Some of them try and miss, but I think in general the level of directing these days is phenomenal.
It's really kicked up a notch. Like I find myself, there was a time when I didn't watch TV at all. I find myself these days, especially with running the channel, I don't even have enough time to watch all the shows that I want to watch. And it's not just me either. Like I'm watching things with my girlfriend. We have things that we both like, and normally we have a little bit of overlap in interest, but not that much. But now you got like the TV shows like The Mandalorian and the spin-off of that, the Book of Boba Fett, and they're just like, the quality is amazing and the emotional investment is there. So if there's ever a time I can't play D&D, I can just chuck one of those on and get my emotional investment fix, as it were.
Yeah, it's the same with maps, man. The industry has become very populated with a lot of mappers now, very talented people.
Yeah.
So many names, you got Zoiva, you got Miss J, you got Alyssa Faden. Just there's so many, and also what you're finding is that there is a lot of software that can auto-generate maps now, which initially we thought that's going to impact our own business model in terms of books versus CDs, or normal stores versus the internet, where people thought, well, because that thing's come along, now I'm going to be wiped out.
Yep.
But I don't think that's been the case at all. I think it's just made people map harder. And some of the maps I've seen in the last 2-3 years are just phenomenal. It's like that chain of creation we were talking about. It's like you see what someone else is doing, and you think, well, I have to do something different, or I have to do something like that but better. And over time, all of these maps that are competing for the space, it just becomes such a high standard. You know, it's amazing, and it just I never stop. I never get tired of looking at other people's maps and seeing how they've done shadows or light or composition wise. It's just really cool. You know, like you can break down how the artist was thinking and what they were trying to achieve. But a lot of the time, their techniques remain a secret. Like you can see what it is, you can see the detail, but you can see like the fingerprints of God, if you like, in people's work, and you can appreciate it. Very hard to replicate it. And I think what you're seeing there is like the essence of the mapper. You're seeing the essence of the cartographer and their soul in the way it puts things together that can't really be emulated by anyone else. You know, you can have a table, and anyone can put a table in a dungeon room and add some blood or cobwebs in a barrel. But the way different mappers do it is always fascinating to me. And one of the more interesting things I found is that when I started, I thought, well, there's probably not a lot of room for maps. You know, D&D's been going for 50, 40 years or something. They've probably done everything under the sun, so I'm going to have to get really creative. And, it wasn't that way at all. There's still call for forests and jungles and caves and snow. And as many maps as I've done, there's still so many that I would like to do. And even though there's like 100 mappers now working constantly, creating maps, you can never have enough. And that's something that takes a little while to wrap your head around, is that there's so many stories, and every single person that tells them has different requirements, has different aesthetic, and it's mind-blowing.
That was going to be a point that I brought up, because that's sort of like the nature of tabletop role-playing games. Is no one game is the same as another. Even though two people might run Lost Mines of Foundelver, you sit down on one person's table, you sit down on another person's table. That game it might have some of the same story threads, but the thing's going to be completely different. You know what I mean? When I'm running Out of the Abyss, guarantee you, no one else is running it the same way that I am. I'm not saying like I'm running it better, but just running it differently. So there's always going to be more demand, and you've tapped into a almost unlimited sort of market, because there's no right or wrong way of playing D&D. There's no right or wrong way of playing any tabletop role-playing game, at least as far as as I'm concerned. Like some people, they use the rules as like a basic guideline and nothing else, and they just fly by the seat of their pants. And other people like to sit down and crunch those numbers. So it's just this huge variety, because everyone can sort of get involved. So maps, you know what I mean? They're always going to be in demand. You're going to have a temple. It's going to be a dwarven temple. Well, how many gods are there in the dwarven pantheon in the Forgotten Realms alone? Let alone Lord of the Rings. What's it called? I forget all the names of the different worlds. Greyhawk and all this kind of stuff. All these different worlds, and that's only dwarven pantheons. Let alone elven pantheons and dragon pantheons, and that's just a temple.
It's as deep as the subconscious, man. It just goes on forever. On that note, I just need to take a 2-minute break. I'll be back in a
Yeah,
sec.
it's all good,
Sorry.
man. We'll go on an official short break. When we come back, we might actually come back with another guest. My good friend Fizz Cannon asked if he could jump on and have a quick chat as well. So we'll go for a quick break. We'll come back and he'll jump in as well. So, all right,
cool.
we'll be right back, guys. Please stick with us. And we're back, everybody, with a special guest. For those who stuck with us, thank you very much. It's always appreciated. We love you. We love having you guys watching the show. We're doing something a little bit different, something a little bit unscheduled, something a little bit unplanned. We had a good friend, Fizz Cannon, reach out to us in the chat to ask if he could get involved, and I thought, hey, I haven't featured Fizz Cannon here on the channel just yet, so why not? Why not jump on board and get involved in the conversation? Why don't you introduce yourself, man?
I'm Fizz. I just like D&D. Been playing it a long time. Started as a kid. 40 now. I like streaming or streamers. I don't know. I love the whole setup. I like the digital age of it all. And
what's your background with D&D? Are you a content creator? Do you do anything like that, or?
I have. I've worked for little campaign companies. I do a lot of volunteering, helping small streamers set up their channels. You know, just quality. As a viewer, I want to see certain things on the screen.
Yep.
That make me enjoy the show.
Well, I'll tell you what. I can guarantee you right now. One of the things that you don't want to see on your screen is my old ugly mug. But guess what? Too bad, because I'm here and I'm here to stay. No matter what you say, Fizz.
There's filters for that.
There is. Yeah. I've got to figure that out one day. Get those Instagram filters and apply them to Twitch. So I can give myself, I don't know, maybe a little bit of a touch up here and there, maybe fix the angle of my nose. It's been broken a couple of times, so it doesn't look so good live on air. But yeah, make my eyelashes a bit bigger, maybe a bit of lip filler. Couldn't hurt. Yeah, you wanted to jump in on the stream. You had something that you wanted to add to the conversation, so now's your chance, man. What do you want to say?
I'm actually glad, because finding out that Map Hatter is a map maker.
Yep.
Right? So coming from old school tabletop, we used to draw everything, just the squares on a piece of paper, right? Or a circle. This is a tree.
Yeah.
Well, it left it to our imagination, which meant that the players really listened and hung on the words that the GM said. And with all the maps that we can find digitally, when you find one as a GM and you're like looking for a map, and you find one and you throw it in, the players see the room, they're looking at it, and they see a table, and it's got like a little a chemistry set on it. But that's not at all what the story is, or where I'm trying to send them, but they'll focus on these little things in the room. Oh, I needed paper. This desk has paper on it.
Mm-hmm.
What's this lever over here? But meanwhile, the room description that I read is not that, and that's all I really wanted to get to. Is I love the art, and if you can draw for your own campaign, wow, it's got to be great to be in that campaign, as a player. But for me, that's the issue I come across. Is there's so much detail, and the players are really get into it. Like, well, I'm gonna roll up this rug, but I said stone floors, And,
yeah. I get where you're coming from. Yeah, this is something that I have to keep in mind as well when I'm selecting maps for different games that I'm running. Is that you have like two different types of people. You got the people who like to, just only sort of imagine what they see, but you got other people who are really visually orientated. So you got some people who really thrive on a basic map that's just drawn on a thing, and then you tell them what's there and they can really picture that. But you got other people who struggle
many empty maps
a little bit more with that, and it's a little bit of a walking the line between the two. So yeah, I have had situations where, you know, I've had richly detailed maps like the one that I have up on screen now, and someone's gone, "What's that on the table?" And then I have to go, "Oh shit, what is that on the table?" and I have to make it up on the spot. Is that something that you sort of keep in mind as well, Map Hatter, when you're making your maps? Like, how much detail should I add? How much should I sort of, you know, keep up to the imagination? Or
Yeah, absolutely. Every DM has different requirements, and so I try to cater to that. Firstly, I will just create the amount of clutter that should be there. It's generally what we call it, is clutter.
Yep.
It could detail objects and things like that, and I will just create it to look utilized, that this is how the room is used and this is why that is in it. But I'm also careful to make sure that there's not so much clutter that the characters can't move through. But I also often provide a blank version of the map with no objects.
Yep.
And token packs, so people can customize it themselves. Another thing people do is, if a room is supposed to be empty, they will put it into Photoshop and they will put a stone floor over the top of the entire room. And if you have a top-down design, it's pretty easy to do that.
That's a good idea. I've never even considered that.
yeah,
Yeah,
just
you
look-
sometimes have to edit the map if you don't want those details there. You do have characters that will investigate absolutely everything.
yeah,
For some people, it's a welcome opportunity. For others, it's a hindrance.
yes.
And in that case, you have to carefully choose which maps you use based on what kind of players you have.
Yeah, I'm just scrolling through some of the maps now. So there's quite obviously some there that are, you know, very populated with different little items, and you know, for some people that's really helpful. That's really immersive, and for some DMs that's actually really helpful for them as well, because it sort of encourages their players to interact with their environment a little bit more. Whereas if you just say there's a table and there's stuff on the table and there's a bookcase and it's got books in it, they sort of, once you're done with the explanation of that, it goes in one ear and it goes out the other ear. Whereas when it's visible, they can go, okay, I'm going to go and investigate that thing, and they can, you know, investigate something that the DM never intended for them to investigate, and then they can go, oh, you know, think on the spot and get really creative. But then they've got other types of DMs that want to have everything planned out, so that can be a little bit more of a hindrance. So I am looking at maps here, and there are, you know, there's quite a few that they have the environment, but not the like clutter, as you say, like stuff there for them to sort of interact with. So does that sort of answer your question satisfactorily, Fizz?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I know that the items can cause a lot of improv, and it can actually create story.
Yeah.
Right? Ones that the GM wasn't expecting, and that really makes him part of that little side swiping makes him more into the story. I like the surprise the players give me.
Yes.
So I mean, that being there actually adds that. As
Yeah.
a player, like, you know, old school, I might be extreme, but I close my eyes and I listen as he paints the picture of the room,
Yes.
because there never was little furniture to stick in the room.
Yes.
You know,
Yep.
it was always, you need to listen because the table leg might be loose, right? Like, I don't know.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I found myself more often than not these days, the more that I'm paying attention to what someone is saying, is the more I'm into the game, the less I'll look at the game. If you watch last night's episode of Out of the Abyss, a lot of the times, and it's probably not really good for like live streaming online, you'll see me just like looking down like this at my sort of microphone. You can't see the microphone, but it's right here. It's because I actually don't want to see like my stream. I don't want to see myself. I don't want to see the other people, because I want to sort of shut out all of my senses, so I'm only really in my own head. You know what I mean? So you know, and it's a bit of personal preference, I guess. Some people can, you know, really activate their creativity whilst still, you know, visually scanning things. Other people, like myself, I like to, you know, almost close my eyes, as it were, like you said, so I can better visualize what's being said by the DM. But I think a good thing about these really detailed maps, like having a variety of very detailed maps as opposed to the more traditional sort of line maps, is that it opens up D&D to more people. You know what I mean? People who are
I don't
more
always have
visually
the words.
inclined. Yeah.
And
So
that can set the mood.
Yeah.
100%.
absolutely. And you know, ambience is a huge thing these days. I'm playing some ambience on the stream right now. That sort of helps sets the mood. We never had that back in the back in the 80s when you were playing a game. But now you can add that, and it's just a little bit of extra flavor, you know, a little bit of extra immersion. I was talking to a few of people on the Discord, you know, about some of the new virtual tabletops that are popping up now that almost look like you're playing a video game, like Tailspire, you know, those ones. There's got to be, I don't know, there is a point, I think, at which the visual aspect can sort of detract from your ability to use your own creativity and imagination. But I don't think that, like, maps like these ones, you know, they're not even coming close to that line. I think they're that perfect balance between engaging creativity whilst also allowing creativity, if that makes sense.
You can also just inform your players. You can say, look, I chose these maps tonight because of the layout, but listen to what I say over what you see. And that's usually enough for them to stop investigating absolutely everything and also pay more attention. Because that's like, you know, you can do that as a DM. You prep your players and say, this, you know, these are great maps, but listen to what I say. You know, so if the room looks like it has a table in it, it's actually going to be how I describe it.
Yeah. So yeah, that's it comes
point.
down to communication with your players, just letting them know that things might not always be like align exactly with what you're seeing on your virtual tabletop. It's a good point, and that comes down to like always having that open communication with players.
I have another map pet peeve, and it goes to Tailspire. When you mentioned Tailspire, it reminded me. On Tailspire, the maps are massive. I can launch my longbow. I can shoot the 600 feet, right? Because the map is long enough. Most battle maps that I find online are 32 by 32.
Yep.
That means a guy with a dagger can chuck it into you from anywhere on the map.
Yep.
But anything beyond a dagger toss is
Useless.
not useless, but
Yeah. We touched on this a few moments ago. I said sort of the same thing when we were talking about, you know, using these sort of modular maps sort of opens up the ability to add more to the map as it becomes relevant. So you can have a map that is, you know, 100 feet or like a 100 squares long and only 30 sort of wide, as it were, so that you can sort of use those abilities. That's something that I found was really restrictive when I was playing, you know, games IRL. Is that a lot of the times I only had so much real estate on my table, so the longbows essentially became you can never use it to the extent of its capabilities.
I found myself more restricted on VTTs because once you load in, say, a 32 by 32 map, a lot of VTTs won't let your token leave that area.
Yes.
You'd have to make a whole new scene.
Yes.
You know, and if the chase scene happens, you know, on a table you can just slide the paper over, add a new paper. Right? It's the table can keep moving. The VTT, you're kind of limited.
To combat that problem, Fizz Cannon, I found it was necessary to make modular maps. So you could, say, have a characters wander endlessly in the desert, and you could completely let them feel that by just joining the map back to itself. And then say that they go into the jungle after they leave the desert, you could join a map to the desert. And so I managed to solve that problem in that you can go into, say, Photoshop and take 20 of my maps, fit them all together to make one big map, and then import it into your VTT, as long as your VTT can handle that size map. Some can't. But that modularity seems to solve that problem, where you can have the world as big as you want and as big as the VTT memory space will allow you to have.
So I'll
Sounds amazing.
I'll quickly show you the map that I quickly chucked together for last night's episode of Out of the Abyss. I am finding the same thing. I am wanting larger maps. That's why that modularity is perfect. But this is a map that I quickly slapped together for the game, and I think it actually touches on, you know, pretty decently a couple of the points that you made. I made this, like, don't judge me, please don't judge me, Map Hatter, for the quality of my map here, because I slapped this together in like an hour or two because I had to do something. But you can see that I've made the map like as large as I could, so there's some open spaces for people to use, like longer ranged sort of stuff, and there's also some more enclosed environments for that sort of claustrophobic sort of thing. But you are correct, and that's something that I'm sort of struggling with as well, is I really do want to like allow players to play on like a huge sort of field, like a huge sort of map, so that they can really engage that sort of creativity. I have to go from one scene to another scene, and you know, it's but when it comes to bigger combat, sometimes I guess I just have to, you know, switch over to a little bit of theatre of mind, as it were, and, you know, just have a character say, you know, I'm 200 feet away, and just sort of, if they walk off the edge of the map, just sort of track that in my mind. I guess I have to go a little bit old school. And it also sort of, it touches a little bit on, you know, that balance of, you know, how much detail do you add, and how much do you not add. As you can see, it's quite bland. There's I've only put the things there that I felt I needed to add there.
I can't see your screen.
Oh, so yeah, that's can you see it on the stream?
Oh, I'm not watching the stream because I'll get feedback loop from the sound.
Well, just mute it. That's what I do. Yeah, so yeah, you can sort of see that I'm trying to work with bigger maps, because like when we first started Out of the Abyss, there's no maps for a lot of the stuff, so I've had to create my own, and the first few I created were too small. I want larger.
Yep, a lot of people do. The VTT sometimes struggles to keep up with that demand versus the mechanics of D&D, which allows you to explore massive distances, especially with the longbow. But, you know, I'm comfortable that my map product at least can meet that challenge, and I see now, still not quite there, but a lot of map makers are starting to turn their attention toward modularity.
Yes, yeah, and that's good.
I haven't seen the modular maps, but I'm liking the thought of it. Like the in between this farmhouse and this farmhouse, there might be just a field with a fence, and that's all that's really on the map. Maybe a cow, right? Like, is that what it is? Modular maps. So the idea behind the modular maps is they're these very detailed battle maps encounters. So you can see, you know, the cracks in the ground, but also the top of a tower. So they do sort of like a 2.5D top-down look.
But the idea was that you could create entire worlds in seconds without having to go through the steps of, say, adding little dungeon tiles together to make a larger map. The idea was to save time, but also to enable you to have these large, detailed spaces between main adventures where people could get lost in the wilderness or wander through the jungle or struggle through a parched desert until they get to the main event. And then over time, I started making maps that featured the main events, and it became a whole world. If you go to GameTileWarehouse.com, you'll immediately see examples of the maps, and just down below there's a video which will show you how they fit together, and you'll be able to see pretty much quite quickly that once you start joining, you can join a single map to itself, or you can join a single map to 2,500 others. So you can straddle genres. You can join zombie to jungle. You can join sci-fi to space western, and you can create trillions of combinations. And every extra meander I make increases that exponentially. So it's as a DM, I wanted something that I could quickly slap down, but also look great and covered the table and allowed me to expand my arena for the players to, the limits of the sandbox indefinitely. And so my map design tried to meet quite a lot of challenges, and I think it's been successful in doing so.
Just wanted to quickly say a huge thank you to All Things Fantasy, I think it is, for bringing a raid into the stream. We really appreciate it. Thank you very much, guys. If you're watching, make sure that you leave a message in the chat for your chance to go into the draw to win a $25 voucher for the Game Tile Warehouse, which is the content produced by my very special guest, the Map Hatter, over here. So, guys, we're just talking to a couple of guests. We're talking all things D&D, tabletop role-playing games, and especially about what my good friend here does. That is making. He's a cartographer. He makes maps and all that kind of stuff. So we're getting a bit of a deep dive into that sort of field, and we're just talking about sort of like how modular maps are, coming into their own, and allows you to sort of unlock that creativity and put sort of larger maps together so that players can really engage with the story and the world and all that kind of stuff. So, and we also have another good friend of the channel, Fizz Cannon, join us tonight. So say hello, Fizz.
Hello, Fizz.
Oh, well, look at that. You know how to take directions. I want you as a player in one of my games.
Matt, do you have that link?
Do I have the link?
What's the link again? Because I'm genuinely curious. Like, I want to
check it out.
Yeah.
Do you want to chuck it in the chat? I'd have to look it up because I don't know. I don't remember where I saved it somewhere. Sorry, I had a really stressful day today. I'll look it up. In the meantime, what I want to hear for you guys. What kind of games, like D&D games, do you prefer? Like genre-wise, do you prefer like serious? Do you prefer like horror? Do you prefer goofy? Like, what's your favorite? And I'm gonna throw it over to, let's start with Map Hatter. What's your preference, genre-wise, for games?
Probably Lovecraft. I think Call of Cthulhu, even though I've only played it twice, it looks like, really does look like my sort of game. 5e I like, but to be honest, I'm now so busy making maps that I very rarely get any time to DM at all. So,
oh man.
Yeah, but that's something I'd really like to try. I'm a huge Lovecraft fan.
Oh man, you're gonna have to tune in for our Call of Cthulhu game, which is coming up next month.
Yeah.
You can tell me all the things that I do wrong because I've never played a Call of Cthulhu game before, so I'm sure you're going to be sitting there like, no, that's wrong, don't do that, stupid.
No, I barely know the rules. I just know that it's really different in terms of aesthetic, and there's a few different mechanics in there that makes it quite interesting. But I'm just a huge Lovecraft fan, so anything to do with that genre, it immediately gets my interest.
Yeah, I've been diving into a lot lately. It's no secret that I'm a huge Glass Cannon podcast fan, and they've been doing 2 streams, Time for Chaos, which is Call of Cthulhu, and I've been catching up recently on their Strange Aeons, which is a Pathfinder adventure path. And that's also very inspired by that sort of Lovecraftian horror. So I'm really diving into it. When I saw an opportunity to get someone on board to run a game of Cthulhu, I was like, I jumped straight on it. Like, that's amazing. All Things Fantasy says, the closest I've placed to Call of Cthulhu is the Paizo Strange Aeons. And Laura Bones says, I'm currently playing Strange Aeons. It's pretty cool. I can't play it now, obviously, because I've listened to it, so it's a bit spoiled for me. But Strange Aeons sounds like an amazing adventure path. It's like right up my alley. It has all those like really deep sort of confrontational horror elements that I really want to explore. I haven't been able to explore in tabletop games. It's actually why I'm running Out of the Abyss for our main campaign every second week, because it has a little bit of that, and I plan to add a lot more. Fizz, what about you, man? What's your genre of choice? Like horror? Do you more like goofy campaigns? Like what do you like?
I have only ever played D&D. I'd be open to playing other games, but it's the only thing I've ever had access to. And at the time when I was asked to play other games, I didn't want to get the rules confused. There's just so many.
It is.
But I prefer a light table. I have a GM for a table, and I'm crying, for the whole 4 hours of laughter. I don't know. I like it loose.
You like it loose. You like it fun. Yeah, that's another thing that I really enjoy. Like, I don't know. I guess I'm a man of like sort of two worlds, because I'm sort of I'm torn in between the two of you. I love that horror, and I also love. I guess if you can find the right balance between the two, I guess that's the reason why I love the Glass Cannon so much, is they can balance it. They can do that that confrontational horror and then just have this ridiculous moment. Like, I was listening to Strange Aeons, and they were doing like a 4-hour stream or something like that, and at one point I was like, wow, this is really dark. And then 10 minutes later, my throat and face was hurting because I was trying to like hold back the laughter from the ridiculous thing that I just heard. So I love the horror, and I love the comedy as well. But even with D&D,
game that was serious.
Yep.
I was just saying, I would love to be in a game that was serious, where you really get emotionally tied into the story and the characters.
Yep.
It's just every table I've ever been at, it's all jokes and good times, you know?
Well, I'll tell you what, man. If we can make the the whole time difference work, maybe you can jump in with one of our games. Because I do like to run mostly serious sort of campaigns with every now and then like a joke thrown in to make everyone laugh. I don't know if you caught last night's episode of Out of the Abyss, but it was a crunchy episode. Like, there were some emotions involved in that one. I won't spoil it for you if you still want to watch it, but it was a good one. I do like serious campaigns, and I do also like that to have a good laugh every now and then, so relieve the stress, as it were.
One of the things that I find that I like is the chessboard. I like crunching the numbers during battle.
Okay. All right.
But after that, I want to roleplay. You know?
Roleplay, yeah, exactly. And I think that's everyone can agree on that. Like, roleplay is so much fun, especially when you got like other role players that you can bounce off, and they bounce off what you say, as opposed to just going yes, or I look at them and nod. So just give us something to work with. we're coming up to the 10 past 10 sort of mark here in if you're in Australia. So we're going to be wrapping it up fairly soon. But before we do, I want to ask a couple more questions. I want to get a little bit more information out of you guys. Map Hatter, do you have any favorite in any tabletop game that you've played? Any favorite races, classes, or campaigns that you've played?
I played a Mute Lizard Man. That was interesting.
A Mute Lizard Man?
Yeah. Yeah, because I was quite obviously introverted and shy, but so I didn't want to talk too much. But it was interesting how creative I had to be to communicate myself.
Okay, yeah, that's a challenge.
Yeah, so in the end, it was kind of like probably should have just talked.
Well, it's you set yourself. You sound like you strike me as the kind of guy who really likes to set himself a challenge. So, and you also strike me as the kind of guy who lives up to that challenge. So, a Mute Lizard Man. Hey. What about you, Fizz? Any recommendations for classes, races, or campaigns?
I try to just pick a race according to the campaign.
Yep.
They're not usually all available. I did choose not a Mute Lizard, but I chose the Grung, and I didn't choose a background that had a language, and I didn't realize until we went to play that I didn't speak Common. And my GM had me gurgling like a merfolk and dancing around to try to communicate until I reached level 3 where I could get a familiar that could speak for me.
I imagine there was a lot of interpretive dance involved in that.
Yeah. So I feel your pain.
I wish we had your camera feed so you can give us a little bit of a teaser of that interpretive dance. I think it would have done really good for the stream. Maybe next time. Who knows? Maybe if I start a Patreon, it could be a Patreon exclusive. Interpretive dance lessons with Fizz Cannon. What do you reckon?
I have to speak with my choreographer, but as long as everything's good legally.
Yeah. I'll talk to the legal team. We'll draw up some contracts. We'll see if we can make it work. Before we finish up for the night, guys, Map Hatter, is there anything else that you wanted to cover before we finish up?
No, I'm good, mate. I just wanted to thanks very much for inviting me onto your stream and having a chance to just sit down and have a chat. It was really fun.
Yeah, thank you very much for joining us.
I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, it's been amazing having you. I sincerely hope that this is not the last time that we see you involved with a stream. I might reach out again and feel I need to scratch that particular itch again and sit down and have a chat, because it's been really comfortable. It's been really organic talking to you. So like both times that we've had a chat has been really awesome. What about you, Fizz? Is there anything that you wanted to throw in there before we wrap it up?
No. I mean, this is good. I wanted to say, Map, I'm looking at your website and I'm liking it. That's for sure.
Thanks.
I feel like I could spend hours in here.
Yeah.
There's a lot of maps.
Please do. Well, imagine how many hours he spent making those maps. Like, I don't even want to think about it because it makes my brain hurt. Before we finish up for tonight, guys, I do want to do the usual rounds of shout outs to all the sorry, I'm losing my voice a little bit here. To all the channel supporters, I want to say a huge thank you to Mark Hillman, who runs the Tales from the Rogueslight Tavern. Another episode of that goes live next week on Saturday at 8 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time. Join us for that. Last episode was absolutely amazing, and it finished up on a cliffhanger. I want to say a huge thank you to my regular players on Out of the Abyss, Toby, Rami, Grace, and Mark. That campaign is always fun, and we run that every second week on a Friday at 8 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time. I want to say a huge shout out to Valiant and the guys at the Valiant Odyssey podcast. You can find that podcast everywhere where you get your podcast from. And I am also a player on their recent Twitch actual play spin-off, the Wasonia Files. And that goes live every Thursday at 7:30 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time, and that's on Valiant Odyssey, so twitch.tv/Valiant Odyssey. Make sure you give them a follow and likes and subscriptions and all that kind of fun stuff. I want to say a huge thank you to Hermes D&D Services, professional D&D services down in Brisbane and Queensland. If you have a party or something coming up, make sure you hit him up. He runs, specialized D&D games. He's amazing, and he's been in a couple of our streams. I want to say a huge thank you to the guys over at the Dungeon Ruse and the Dungeon Ruse podcast. You can find their podcast everywhere where you get podcasts from as well. They are from Townsville as well. They're good friends of ours, and they have a lot of fun. They have a bit more of a goofy campaign. Who am I forgetting? Froths from Froths Minis. Some of the best minis that you can find on the market right now. Check him out. He's a huge supporter of the show. I got one of his minis right here. I haven't painted it because I just can't do that because I'm too stupid. But he started streaming as well. So if you want to find out how to paint the minis, check out his streams because they're really cool and he's really talented. Of course, you need to check out the Game Tile Warehouse. I chucked that in the chat just a moment ago. And drop some money. We've got the $25 voucher. I'm going to be announcing the winner of that next week on Tales of the Roguelite Tavern. You still have a chance to enter the draw. If you didn't manage to do that tonight, you can leave a message or comment on our Facebook page with hashtag, Critical Conversations. Or you can, leave a comment like that anywhere and you'll go on the draw to win that one. Oh, also, Luke Archard from Big Game Small Pieces. Got to do a big shout out for him. My OG DM, the guy that got me into it. And, of course, Fizz Gannon, our other guest for tonight. Thank you for joining us, man.
Thank you. Thank you both for letting me jump on.
No worries at all. No worries at all. It's been awesome, guys. Thank you very much for sitting down and listening to me ramble on. It's been amazing. Hopefully we'll see you guys again soon. Good night, everybody.
Yeah.
Waving. Can't see it, but I'm waving.
Can't see it, but he is. We'll trust you.
Good night, everyone.